Welcome, students, and you guys are now in week 3 of your class, and I'm very proud of what you've done so far. And so this week in week 3, we're discussing occasion and tone. And so when we talk to our bosses, we use a more professional tone, and we use formal English with no slang, no contractions, and we use third-person case with passive voice. Then when we write to our friends, we tend to use first-person case, I, me, we, us, and second-person case, you and your, and we use a more casual, informal English. And so most of you have understood this concept, and you've written really, really well in the discussion forums. And so when we have different registers, so I did introduce 2 new concepts, the idea of social register and code switching. And so if you are a monolingual speaker, that is, you only know one language, then what you do is you change from informal to formal English, formal to informal English, and that would be known as social register. Social register means that we change the voice of our of how we speak, depending on whom we're speaking to, and we change the way we write, depending on whom we're writing to, and depending on our audience. And so this particular lesson for week 3, we focused on audience. For when we write something, we always have to be aware of our audience. And then when we code switch, that's the other term that I used. Code switching is if you are a bilingual speaker, and let's say you speak Spanish at home, and then at work you speak English. So the fact that you have to change from one culture and language to another culture and language for speaking and writing in different places, that's known as code switching, because you're changing from the way you do things in, say, Spanish or Chinese culture. So that's one code and one way of doing things. And you're switching to another culture, and code switching to, say, American culture, where you're speaking English. Now, linguists believe that each language that you learn opens the door or the window to a new culture, so that the more languages you know, the more cultures you are familiar with. So for me, I speak Chinese and English. And when I was little, I used to speak only Chinese at home. And then at school, I would speak English. So basically, I grew up with both Chinese and English. So that for me, when I was a kid, I would code switch between Chinese and English. Chinese at home, like with my parents, and then English at school. I remember in first grade, before I really learned English well, I used to speak Chinese at home. And anyway, so in first grade, my first grade teacher said to my mother, because I was getting low grades in my first grade class, and I wasn't understanding what the first grade teacher was saying. So the first grade teacher said to my mother at the parent conference, she said, "You need to speak English to your daughter at home, because up till I was 6, I was only speaking Chinese at home." So after the age of 6, my parents started speaking to me in English and Chinese. So as a result, I was able to learn English in just 3 months or so at the age of 6.5. Up until the age of 6.5, I knew mainly Chinese. And I could understand the English of the other kids, but I could not understand the English of the teachers, because they spoke too complicated English and too fast. Whereas when the kids spoke English, it was very, very easy. It was like, do you know how to spitball? Do you know how to, it's usually something naughty. And so the kids' English was way easier. And so I code switched when I was a kid. And then once I learned English, then I would speak English to my parents. They would speak English back. Occasionally, they would mix it in with Chinese. So for me, it was a mix of Chinese and English, code switching to English. And now as an adult, I don't really hear that much Chinese anymore. But when I'm at work, now it's more like a social register. Now I'm more like the monolingual speakers. And so I just switch from informal English with my friends, to formal English when I'm with my boss. And the same thing with social register with my writing. And I tend to write really short, concise messages to my boss. And then I can write longer messages to either students or friends. So for me, I'm a little more casual with my students and with my friends than I am with my boss. So that would be for me, social register. And so those are the two words you get added because your teacher is a linguist, so you get to learn code switching and social register. Another 3 words I'd like you to be familiar with is ethos, pathos, and logos. And so when we write anything and we want an effective argument, we want to have all 3 appeals Aristotle created. In order to have a really good argument, you have to have ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the appeal to credibility. That means that your paper is credible and believable, and it means that your paper is written by an expert, a scientist, and not an athlete or a politician. And then pathos means that you use good descriptive language to hook the reader into your paper. For pathos is the appeal to emotion. So in order to keep the reader interested, you have to appeal to the reader's emotion by appealing to all 5 senses. And then logos is the appeal to logic, where you have to have a thesis statement, one main idea for your entire paper or message, and then you have to have body paragraphs that match your thesis. So that's the appeal to logic, logos. And so ethos, pathos, logos. So as long as your paper has ethos, pathos, logos, then you have a valid argument. As soon as you're missing any one of those appeals of ethos, pathos, and logos, then your argument becomes fallacious. So this is why we learn how to use APA, because American Psychological Association, that means we learn how to do research and we learn how to notate the research for whenever we use a numerical statistical information, because that adds credibility to our paper. Another thing I want to add is first person, second person, and third person case. First person case is when I talk about myself. I, myself, me, we, us. Second person case is when you're talking to someone, like you and your, when you're directly addressing the reader. And then third person case is he, she, and they. That means when you're talking about somebody else. So if I say, I go to the store every day, that's first person case because I'm talking about myself, I, we, and us. Then I said, you go to the store. That is second person case because you're telling somebody what to do. Third person case, Mr. Smith went to the store. He, she, they. That's third person case. So when we write an academic paper, in order to maintain a professional tone, we need to use third person case. Mr. Smith went to the store. Because when we are writing academic papers, we want to maintain that professional tone. And so third person case is the most objective tone of all of them, of all the cases, okay? Because so if you were to listen to someone say, I use steroids, or you use steroids, or Mr. Smith used steroids, or while playing baseball or something, which is wrong. So third person case sounds the most objective and sounds the most professional. And so for your papers, you have to avoid first and second person case. So that was a common mistake in the illustrative essay, part 2, as I was grading. That was so people forgot to put in their first person case. Some students wrote, in my opinion. So you got to delete, in my opinion. And some people wrote, I believe, I think. You have to delete, I believe, and I think. And another person wrote, you have to be a good team player. Your team will be more productive if you follow these directions, or that sort of thing. You have to get rid of all the you, that second person case, and instead use a third person case. So if I would say that if a person follows these rules, then their team will be more productive. Instead of saying, if your team follows these rules, your team will be more productive. So if we use third person case, the person's team instead of your team, that makes the paper sound more credible and believable. And so if you were to look back on the week 3 notes on academic voice, so in order to maintain an academic voice, we need to stick to third person case. So that was also a very common mistake. Now, if you have trouble converting your you and your into third person case, you can always email me or you can call me. And so if you call me, then I will, I have my number in your notes, in the class notes and in the email. So you can always email me if you're having trouble converting one case to another, or if you're having trouble coming up with a topic for the next essay. And so, and then for next week, we're going into week 4. And yes, you're going to be starting your persuasive essay. So start thinking about what persuasive essay topic you want to write about. So a persuasive essay is when we want to convince the person of your point of view. You're going to take a position on a topic. And so what position are you going to take? You're either for or against the topic. And so you would state abortion is moral or abortion is immoral, but you have to state your position. Then you write 3 reasons why you think that why your position is valid. Or you have gun control is necessary because, and then you would state the 3 reasons why gun control is necessary. Or you could say gun control is not necessary because. So that's for next week's persuasive essay. So you're going to write a thesis statement, and then you're going to write your 3 reasons why your point of view is correct. And then in week 5, you will finish your illustrative essay, part 3. So basically, you're going to be writing 2 essays at the same time in this class. So even though you're not fully finished with illustrative essay, you will be starting your persuasive essay. So if you have any questions about any of the topics and also when you take your quizzes, you should always watch the video first, Sean's video, before you take the quizzes, because the quizzes are based on Sean's video. You can also look over my supplementary quiz notes to help you with the quiz as well. So after you watch Sean's video, then you can read my supplemental lecture notes to help you understand the material. Then last but not least, you can take your quiz. And you can take your quiz as many times as you need to until you get the highest score. So if you have any questions about week 1, week 2, and week 3, feel free to email me. That pretty much ends this particular week 3 summary wrap up. We're almost halfway to this class. It went so fast. These 8 weeks go by very fast. And so if you have any questions, feel free to email me.